It was supposed to be just another quiet morning in New Orleans, the kind where the river rolled lazily under the weight of early sun, and the air still carried the hush of dreams not yet spoken aloud. The wrought iron balconies above Decatur Street gleamed with dew, and the scent of cinnamon and chicory drifted out from the cafes that had just unlocked their doors. Elliot Monroe adjusted the cuff of his navy jacket and exhaled slowly. He didn't know why he was nervous. Technically, he had no reason to be. He was back in town for a tech symposium, 3 days of lectures, panels, and press interviews. But that wasn't the reason he'd taken the earlier flight. That wasn't why he'd arrived in the French Quarter 5 hours ahead of schedule, walking without direction until his feet led him to a cafe he used to know. Or maybe, to a memory he hadn't forgotten. The bell above the door chimed softly as he stepped inside the Lantern Cafe. The warmth of the place hit him first: vanilla, fresh pastries, and the unmistakable comfort of places that had outlived heartbreak. The room buzzed gently with quiet conversations, cutlery clinking, and the shuffle of chairs. And then he saw her. Selena. She was sitting in the far corner, near the window, where the morning light spilled like honey across the hardwood floor. Her hair, still that rich, golden-brown cascade, was pulled into a loose braid, and she wore a soft chambray dress that made her look effortless. She leaned forward, smiling as she offered a bite of pancake to a toddler with chubby cheeks and a hoodie too oversized for his frame. At first, Elliot thought it was just a coincidence, a resemblance. The kind your brain tricks you into believing when you're still haunted. But then the little girl sitting beside the toddler tilted her head and laughed. And in that laugh, in the dimple on her right cheek, and how her eyes lit up, he saw it. Saw himself. His knees nearly gave out. He watched, stunned, as 2 more children emerged from behind the table, one with a sketchpad in hand, the other balancing a juice box and a spoon like a sword. All 4 of them buzzed around her like planets around a sun, orbiting without question, without effort. And Selena. Selena moved with the kind of grace born from chaos, weathered and survived. There was no hesitation in her movements. She wiped crumbs from one child's mouth, adjusted the ribbon in another's hair, caught a falling fork mid-air, and smiled as if this life had always been meant for her. And she looked happy. Elliot felt the breath catch sharp in his throat, the kind of silence that's not empty, but full of everything you never said. He should have turned around. He should have walked out and left that moment untouched, like a page you don't dare reread. But something more profound than guilt, stronger than logic, held him there. A unformed and terrifying need pushed his feet forward just one step, just one more glance. Selena's eyes lifted, met his. Time fractured. The sounds of the cafe fell away, muffled beneath the thunder of memory and regret roaring in his chest. Her expression shifted: surprise, then disbelief, and finally, that familiar calm steel that once made Elliot fall in love with her in the first place. She stood slowly, not protectively, not fearfully, but with a steady elegance that placed her, instinctively, between the children and him. "Elliot," she said. Her voice didn't tremble. "What are you doing here?" He couldn't answer right away, could barely swallow the lump rising in his throat. "Selena," he breathed. "Hi." One of the children, a little girl with fiery curls and Elliot's exact chin, looked up at her mother and whispered, "Mommy, who's that?" Selena bent down, tucking a curl behind her daughter's ear. "Just someone I used to know," she said softly. Her eyes didn't leave his. There was no anger in her gaze, but no warmth either. Only the kind of stillness that comes from learning to survive without waiting for someone to return. "Can we talk?" Elliot asked, his voice hoarse. Selina considered this. Then, glancing at the empty chair across from her, she nodded. Talk then. And that, dear listener, is where everything begins, not with a kiss or a goodbye, but with 4 small faces, 1 table between them, and a lifetime of questions waiting on the other side. Sometimes, we walk away thinking we've escaped, but destiny has a habit of finding us right where our hearts are. If this opening has stirred something in you, if you've ever wondered what it means to choose again after the damage has been done, tell us, could you forgive someone who walked away when you needed them most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. For example, if you believe in second chances, don't forget to follow our channel, because what unfolds next between Elliot, Selina, and the 4 little souls neither of them expected might stay with you long after the story ends. Elliot didn't remember the coffee shop being this quiet. The clinking spoons, the soft hiss of milk being steamed behind the counter, and the breeze ruffling paper napkins near the door faded as he sat across from her. Selina didn't offer a smile, not even the polite kind you give to old acquaintances. But she didn't look away either. Her eyes, those deep, storm-gray eyes that once held his entire future, studied him without sentiment, like she was assessing a stranger she might have once trusted with too much. The children had returned to their breakfast, half aware of the tension. One reached for a napkin, another tried to balance a strawberry on a spoon. Selina's hand crept, slicing pancakes, offering water, dabbing syrup from a cheek. Sorry you found. She'd become so much more than the woman Elliot remembered, so much more alive and contained. 4 of them, he said softly. Her hand paused mid-reach. You didn't know, she said flatly. It wasn't a question. No, he admitted. I didn't even know you kept the pregnancy. Selina exhaled through her nose, not in frustration, but as if the truth was too tired to surprise her anymore. You didn't ask. She didn't say it with venom. She didn't need to. The weight of that sentence sat heavily between them. He looked down at the wooden table and the crayon drawings one of the children had left scattered. Abstract scribbles in green and blue, tiny fingerprints smudged across the corners, evidence of life. Joyful, chaotic, unapologetically alive. They're beautiful, he said, barely above a whisper. They're strong, she replied. There was a pause, long enough for her to refill a sippy cup and for his hands to start trembling under the table. I was a coward, Elliot said, the words coming slower than he meant. I thought walking away was better than staying and failing. Selina didn't flinch, but something flickered in her eyes. Maybe recognition. It could be something colder. And yet, she murmured, you failed anyway. He swallowed hard. What are their names? She didn't look at him when she answered. Ava, Leo, Simone, Isaiah. The names clung to the air, soft and sharp. He repeated them quietly, like he was etching them into bone. He wasn't sure what he expected in that moment, tears, yelling, a crack in the polished surface of her strength. But Selina only continued her quiet ritual, cleaning up crumbs, wiping little mouths, reminding Isaiah to chew before he spoke. She had built a world without him, and he could feel the weight of it pressing in on him, how carefully it had been stitched together, how he had missed every step, every first, every sleepless night and fevered tear. He had missed Ava's first song, Leo's wild inventions, Simone's quiet art, Isaiah's fearless tumbles. And still, here she was, whole, not untouched, not unscathed, but undeniably radiant in her resilience. He looked at her then, really looked. Her hair had more copper strands than he remembered. Her posture was a little more guarded, but her eyes still held galaxies when the light hit them just right. And he saw something else there, too weariness. Yes, but also defiance, A woman who had stopped waiting for someone to save her, because she had saved herself. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said. Selina finally met his eyes. "But you never came back," she replied, even. "Not for me. Not for them. I didn't think I had the right." "No," she said. "You didn't." The words hit him harder than any raised voice could have, because there was no anger behind them, only truth. A truth she had lived with for years while he signed contracts, sat on panels, and gave interviews about ambition and innovation. "You're here now," she added after a moment, her tone unreadable. "So what do you want, Elliot?" He opened his mouth, but the answer didn't come. Not easily, because he didn't want to say something hollow like, "I want to fix this," or "I want forgiveness." He didn't even know if he deserved a second look from her, let alone a place at that table with pancakes and crayons and 4 brilliant lives. "I want to understand," he said finally. "And if you'll let me, I want to be part of their lives." Selina blinked once, slowly. Then her eyes moved across the room to where the children now huddled by the window, whispering about something funny Ava had drawn on a napkin. "They don't know who you are," she said, not unkindly. "They've grown up loved, protected." "I won't take that away," he said. I want to try. I want to earn whatever I can, even if it's just a sliver of space in their story." Selina didn't respond at first. Instead, she turned toward Isaiah, who was now stacking sugar packets with an intensity that made her smile despite herself. Then she stood, slowly, gathering the napkins, the wrappers, the half-eaten snacks. The children began to hop down from their chairs, one by one, like a flock of small birds ready to scatter. As they bundled into coats and backpacks, Isaiah clung to her leg. "Mommy, can I draw more at home?" "Yes, baby," she murmured. "We'll draw." Ava slipped her hand into her mother's. Selina reached for Isaiah with the other hand. As they turned to leave, she paused only for a moment and looked back at Elliot. "Meet me by the river," she said. "Later, after school pickup." He nodded. His throat was too tight for words, and then she was gone. The door closed behind them, with the quiet click of inevitability. Elliot found himself staring at the space where they had been 4 children. A woman who had once trusted him with everything, but he received nothing but silence in return. Outside, the sun rose, spilling golden light over the city. But inside him, something else was breaking open. Not regret, not yet hope. Just the beginning. The Mississippi River shimmered like a ribbon of molten gold under the waning light. By late afternoon, the French Quarter had softened its hustle street musicians, winding down their melodies, shop fronts closing with a gentle creak, and the smell of powdered sugar lingering faintly in the air. Elliot stood by the iron railing at the riverfront, hands tucked in the pockets of his gray jacket, trying not to look like a man rehearsing every sentence in his head. He had arrived early, as always when the stakes were high. But this wasn't a product launch, a keynote address, or a meeting with venture capitalists. This was far more uncharted, raw, unpredictable, and deeply human. He remembered this stretch of the river. They used to walk here in the quiet hours, when the city pulsed like a lullaby. Selina would stop at the edge of the dock and lift her face to the breeze, as if listening to something only she could hear. Back then, she would always reach for his hand. Now, he waited with no assurance of touch or welcome. He heard the footsteps before he saw her. Selina approached in silence, her dress moving gently in the breeze. A denim jacket pulled snug over her shoulders. The sky behind her bled into rose and slate blue hues, the way southern evenings often did, without warning, with all their softness. The children weren't with her. Her expression was unreadable. Not cold, not open, just composed. Like someone who had practiced walking through fire without making it anyone else's problem. "You came," she said. "I said I would." For a moment, neither of them moved. The breeze picked up slightly, stirring her braid and brushing the hem of her dress against her knees. "You said you didn't know," she began, gazing toward the water. "About the babies, about what came after." "I didn't," Elliot said, careful not to reach for her, not to crowd the space she stood in. "I thought you wanted me gone, that you'd moved on, that my silence was what you needed." Selena tilted her head slightly. "I did, for a long time." He looked at her, then not at the slope of her shoulders or the line of her jaw, but into her face. And in that face, he saw no bitterness, only the remnants of something deeper, something heavier than resentment. "And now?" he asked, unsure if he even deserved to know. She sighed, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "But I do know the kids deserve the truth. And maybe—" her voice softened. "Maybe I do too." Elliot nodded. "Thank you for giving me this." "Don't thank me yet," she replied, a flicker of a wry smile on her lips. "I'm still not sure what this is." They started strolling, side by side, their steps out of sync, but somehow unforced. They passed the old bookshop she used to visit, its windows now lined with seasonal postcards. They passed the iron bench where he once kissed her cheek for the first time, the week before proposing. The weight of memory was thick in the air, but neither spoke of it. Not yet. "I was angry for years," Selena said suddenly. "But mostly, I was disappointed. Not just you, in myself, for believing you'd choose us." He stopped walking. "I didn't think I could be what you needed," he said, voice low. "And that scared me more than I knew how to admit." "I don't want an apology," she said. "I want honesty. What changed, Elliot? Why now?" He didn't speak right away. The wind carried the sound of distant jazz from a balcony above them. He stared at the river, watching it move like time never still, never the same. "I got everything I thought I wanted," he said. "Articles, awards. My name is on the building. But every night I came home to silence. No laughter. No tiny feet running down hallways. No reason to pause. No one is waiting." He turned toward her, not with pleading eyes, but with a kind of nakedness that felt unfamiliar even to himself. "And then I saw you with them. And I realized," he trailed off. "I've been starving for years, Selena. And I didn't even know it." She looked at him then, full on. And in the growing dusk, her face was luminous, lined with time, colored with truth. She said nothing, but her silence wasn't rejection. It was considered. "They're good kids," she said, almost reverently. "Ava reads books meant for middle schoolers. Leo can dismantle a toaster and put it back together with extra parts. Simone sketches everything she sees, even in the margins of her homework. And Isaiah—" Her smile softened. "He'll probably be a surgeon. He patched our neighbor's scraped knee with a Band-Aid and charged him in jelly beans." Elliot laughed, and it felt strange, almost like something foreign returning home. "I'd give him a whole box." Her gaze didn't break. "You missed everything." "I know. First steps, first words, fevers, nightmares, science fairs, tea parties, every hard day, every beautiful one." "I know," he repeated, quieter this time. "And I'll never get them back." She studied him. waiting for a defense, an excuse, but none came. "I'm not here to be forgiven," he added. "I'm here because I'm not leaving again. Not for a press tour, not for fear, not for myself." Selena's eyes glistened in the fading light, but she didn't blink. "Do you know what trust is, Elliot?" she asked gently. He nodded faintly. "It's what I lost." "No," she said. "It's what you gave up." They stopped walking near the bend in the river, where an old playground sat nestled under ancient oaks. There were no children now, only stillness and the rustle of leaves. But something shifted between them in that space, not an opening, but the first hinge giving way. And then, the sound of small feet came from around the corner. Shouts, laughter. "Mommy!" The children ran toward her like an incoming tide. Ava reached her first, her curls bouncing. Leo followed close behind, then Simone, arms full of colored leaves, and Isaiah, who tripped and skinned his knee without slowing down. Elliot froze. It was one thing to see them from a distance. It was another to be seen. "Where's the feather?" Ava asked, breathless. "In my hair," Selena answered, tucking the small found treasure above her ear. "Just like yours." The children huddled around her. Then slowly, curiously, they turned toward him. A beat passed. "Is he a stranger?" Leo asked, eyes narrowing. Selena crouched to meet their level. "This is Elliot," she said softly. "He was an important part of my life long ago." Isaiah blinked. "Like a prince who went away?" Elliot knelt slowly, his throat tightening. More like someone who got lost and took too long to find his way back. There was silence. Then Simone stepped forward, holding out a crayon. "Do you want to draw?" It was, in its way, an offering. And it was enough. The air in the house smelled faintly of lavender and something warm, toast, maybe, or banana bread. The kind of scent that lingered not just on the walls, but in memory. Selena stood at the kitchen counter, one hand steadying a bowl, while the other cracked eggs with practiced rhythm. The late morning light dripped lazily through gauzy curtains, brushing the faded blue cabinets and the drawings taped to the refrigerator with a soft glow. Behind her, slight, uneven, tumbling footsteps rippled through the living room. Crayons rolled across the floor, followed by Simone's exasperated voice. "Leo, that was my cloud!" Leo, undeterred, responded with a giggle. Somewhere deeper in the house, Isaiah sang to himself, half a lullaby, half nonsense, all heart. And Ava's soft reading voice drifted down the hallway, steady and measured. It had become their symphony, chaotic and imperfect, yet startlingly whole. Elliot stood just outside the screen door, his breath catching not at its domesticity, but at its rhythm, at how complete it seemed without him. Selena turned slightly, noticing him there. "You're early," she said, without surprise, without invitation. "I didn't want to miss anything," he answered, stepping inside. "Though it sounds like I already have." "You missed Simone's masterpiece on the dining room wall," she said, glancing over her shoulder with the faintest trace of amusement. "Permanent marker. Family of unicorns." He followed her gaze to the wall, where bright pink creatures with too many legs pranced across the paint. Somehow, it suited the room. "I like them," he said honestly. She handed him a dish towel, wordlessly gesturing toward the drying rack. He understood. Start with something simple, something that didn't require explanation. As they moved through the kitchen, their silence wasn't heavy. It was careful, not distant, but deliberate, like a song neither wanted to rush. "I bought groceries," he said after a while. I didn't know what the kids liked, so I got everything." Selena didn't look up. "Everything's excessive, but thank you." There was no heat in her voice, just a quiet reminder of the difference of the way he once lived and the way she still did. "They like waffles," she added after a pause, "and orange slices. They fight over the ones without seeds." "Noted." Simone stormed into the room, hair wild, face flushed. She clutched a sheet of paper in one hand and pointed at Leo with the other. "He stole my son!" Leo peeked in from behind the hallway, looking too smug for someone so small. Selena knelt, eye level with her daughter. "And did you ask him why?" "Because he said his grass needed it more." Selena blinked, then stood and turned to Elliot. "Your child is an ecological revisionist." Elliot raised both hands. "I plead genetics." The moment passed in a bubble of laughter so light and natural that it almost startled them both. Selena caught herself first, her smile fading into something more reserved. "After lunch," she said, turning back to the stove, "I need to pick up Isaiah's prescription. If you're serious about helping, you can come with me." "I'm serious," he said. "Good," she replied. "Then you can help carry the twins while they argue about whose rain boots are faster." True to her word, the afternoon unfolded like a quiet trial, a series of small, ordinary moments stacked one after the other, testing his patience, gentleness, and capacity to belong. Isaiah clung to Selena's arm at the pharmacy, while Ava asked questions about every bottle on the shelf. Simone nearly knocked over a display of vitamins. Leo insisted on counting every chair in the waiting area. And Elliot, feeling the fray of it all, didn't complain. He crouched beside Simone and helped her rebuild the display. He listened to Ava without checking his watch. He carried Isaiah when he grew too tired to stand. And when Leo fell asleep on his shoulder in the car ride home, Elliot didn't shift or breathe too loudly, afraid to disturb whatever fragile magic had allowed that trust. Back at the house, the children scattered into familiar corners, shedding shoes, jackets, and noise. Selena stood by the sink, watching the last light of afternoon press against the window panes. "You didn't flinch," she said. Elliot looked up from where he was unlacing Leo's sneakers. "Was I supposed to?" She didn't answer. Instead, she handed him a stack of clean towels. "Can you take these to the bathroom?" He did. And when he returned, she lit a candle on the counter, her face illuminated by the flicker of orange. "They ask about you sometimes," she said quietly. "Not in the way you'd expect. They don't say Dad. They don't even ask why you're not here. They ask about it before they are born, before the studio, before I stopped dancing in the kitchen." He stood still, unsure if she wanted him to speak, so he didn't. "I tell them the truth," she continued, "that you and I loved each other once. You were brilliant and strange, making me laugh at 2 a.m., and that you were scared, and that I was too." She paused. "I don't tell them about the airport, or the voicemail, or the silence that stretched so long, I forgot the sound of your voice. I don't want them to carry that." He wanted to say he was sorry, but the words had grown brittle, and an apology, on its own, had long expired. "I'm trying," he said instead, "to be someone I wasn't. Not for redemption. Just to be enough." Selena looked at him, and this time, she looked not at who he was, but at who he was trying to be. And maybe for the first time, she didn't see a man who had run. She saw one who had finally stopped. The sun dipped fully beneath the horizon, the room now lit by candlelight, and the slow, gentle hush of children settling into sleep. Outside, wind chimes whispered against the porch railings, and Ava's soft humming began somewhere in the house. A song without words, familiar and fading. Selena leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You can stay for dinner," she said. Not as a reward, but as a beginning. The evening settled over the house like a hush, not silent, but softened, the kind of quiet that follows a day well spent, full of motion and voices, now folds gently into the folds of dusk. Outside, the first stars began to push through the indigo sky, and the warm hum of cicadas created a steady rhythm behind the lull of the kitchen fan. Elliot stood at the stove, apron slightly askew, spatula in hand. He had flour on his sleeves, olive oil on his forearm, and a question lingering somewhere behind his ribs he wasn't ready to ask. "I haven't cooked in years," he admitted, glancing toward Selena. She was across the kitchen, her back turned, rinsing strawberries under cool water. Her dress had tiny flecks of pancake batter near the hem, and a smudge of something sweet near her elbow. But her hands moved with ease, slicing with the same care she reserved for threading hair through braids or tucking a blanket beneath a sleeping child. "I can tell," she said, her voice dry as she inspected a slightly over-browned grilled cheese on a nearby plate. He smiled, despite himself. The children had already eaten. They devoured Elliot's clumsy dinner with unfiltered delight, laughing through mouthfuls, Leo requesting seconds, Simone asking if he'd consider opening a restaurant called Dadwiches. The name stuck. Ava had drawn a sign for it before dessert. Now, the house had quieted into that sacred in-between space, before bedtime, but after the day had exhaled. Books were being picked, pajamas negotiated, stuffed animals retrieved from corners, and beds rearranged with the urgency only children seemed to assign to evening rituals. Selena placed the strawberries in a bowl and turned toward Elliot. "Tea?" He nodded. She poured without asking how he liked it. She remembered. They sat on opposite ends of the kitchen table, the old fan rotating with a gentle creak above them. For a long while, they didn't speak. Not because they had nothing to say, but because silence, for the first time in a long time, wasn't a threat. Elliot looked at her over the rim of his mug. "I forgot how good this table feels." Selena glanced down, brushing her fingers lightly across a faded etching in the wood, a miniature doodle of a sunflower Ava had carved in with a fork last spring. "It's solid," she said, a little worn, but still standing. He met her gaze. There was something in his expression not pleading, not desperate, just quietly present. It was as if he understood now that showing up wasn't about saying the right thing. It was about staying long enough to listen. "I used to think love was this burst," he said after a pause. "A flame. Something that happened all at once, loud and fast. But I was wrong. It's this. The ordinary things. Holding a fork, drying a dish, laughing when the pasta sticks." Selena tilted her head slightly. "It's all of it," she said. "The burst, the quiet, the cracks." "I couldn't have known how to hold it then," he said, honest and unpolished. "But I want to learn now, not just for them." His voice softened. "For you." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood and moved to the sink, rinsing out her mug, her fingers lingering beneath the warm water. Through the window, she could see the porch where Thomas used to sit at night, humming under his breath, watching the stars rise like promises. "You think it's just about learning again," she said, her voice low. "But Elliot, for me, it's about unlearning. I had to forget how it felt to need you, to wait for you, to believe that someday you'd walk through that door." He rose slowly, not to close the distance, but to meet her where she was. "I know," he said. Her shoulders were still, but not tense. There was no shield in her posture, only the weight of having carried too much alone. "I told myself I didn't love you anymore," she whispered. "That love didn't survive the silence. But you keep showing up, and I don't know what that means." "It means," he said carefully, "I'm still here when the noise fades, when the lights go out, when dinner burns and kids spill, and the world isn't forgiving. I want to be here in all of it." A small voice called from the hallway. "Mom?" Selena turned. "Yes, baby?" Ava, barefoot, holding a book nearly as tall as her. "Will you read to us?" "In a minute." The girl nodded and disappeared down the hallway with quiet steps. Selena turned back toward Elliot, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to see the lines she remembered and the man he had become. "I don't know if I can fall back into something that once broke me," she said gently. He didn't answer right away. He didn't rush to fill the space with promises. Instead, he stepped back, giving her room, and nodded once. "I'm not asking you to fall," he said. "I'm asking to walk beside you, however long it takes." She watched him gather the plates from the table and rinse them under the sink. He wiped the counter without being told, folded the towel neatly, and placed it back on the oven handle. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't linger. When he reached the door, she said his name, Elliot. He turned. "If you're serious," she said, "tomorrow starts early. Isaiah has a dentist appointment, and Leo's science project is due." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'll be here." She nodded once. Then she turned off the kitchen light, the darkness folding around her like a blanket, soft and full of questions. Upstairs, the children were waiting, and tomorrow, like every day before it, would ask her to begin again. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, she felt something quiet bloom inside her chest. Not certain, but maybe the beginning of trust. The sky cracked open just after dawn. It wasn't the kind of storm with a gentle roll that announced itself. No, it came suddenly, an orchestra of thunder, the heavy percussion of rain pelting the roof, and a wind so wild it tossed the porch swing against the siding like a warning. The windows moaned under the pressure, and the old magnolia tree in the yard bent just enough to remind everyone that roots, no matter how deep, still tremble in the face of wind. Inside, the Miller house stirred. Selena was already awake, standing barefoot in the hallway in her oversized sweater, one hand pressed lightly to the wall, listening. The children hadn't yet stirred. For once, the house felt almost still. She turned toward the kitchen, intending to make coffee before the chaos began, when she heard the front door creak. "Dad?" she called, her voice uncertain. No answer. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows in relentless rhythm. She crossed the living room quickly, pulled open the front door, and saw him. Thomas, her father, crumpled on the porch, tools scattered across the wet wood, one arm flung limply across his chest, the other hanging by his side. His shirt was soaked through, silver hair matted to his forehead. "Daddy," she breathed, rushing forward. Her knees hit the porch hard as she slid to his side. His face was pale, the color drained from his lips, but he was breathing shallow, faint, but breathing. Selena's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. 911, she whispered. "Please, my father." He collapsed. The children began to stir inside the house, their soft voices threading through the walls. Selena looked back only once, calling for Ava to stay inside, her voice barely steady, then turned back to Thomas and whispered, "Hold on. Please hold on." The ambulance came like thunder, reincarnated lights flashing red against the soaked walls of the house, sirens a sharp wail through the downpour. Mary, her mother, pulled into the driveway just as they loaded Thomas onto the stretcher. She didn't ask questions. She ran to Selena, her arms already open. "Go," Mary said. "I'll stay with the kids." At the hospital, the hallways were lit too brightly, sterile in their calm. Selena sat hunched in a chair in the waiting area, her hands clenched in her lap, her clothes still damp, her thoughts looping with no anchor. The rain had followed her there, pressing against the tall glass windows, casting soft shadows on the tile. And then I came as fast as I could. Elliot. He was drenched, wind-blown, his tie askew, and his shoes muddy. His eyes, though his eyes were clear, sharp, and deeply afraid. Selena looked up, startled, but didn't speak. She didn't have to. He sat beside her, silent, present. His presence wasn't loud. It wasn't a declaration. It was a chair filled, a shoulder slightly offered, a breath steadied beside hers. "I'm here," he said, almost a whisper. "You're not alone." Time passed strangely after that. Nurses came and went. Names were called. Selena pressed her fists to her mouth to hold the sobs down. And when the doctor finally arrived, she stood before them with kind eyes and a tired smile. "He's stable," she said gently. "It was a mild cardiac episode. We're keeping him overnight, but he'll recover just fine." Selena sagged, her entire body exhaling at once. "Thank you," she whispered. Elliot reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Later, the nurse led them into the recovery room. Thomas lay against the pillow, his chest rising slowly, eyes closed, but his features more relaxed now. Selena stepped in first, carefully brushing the damp hair from his forehead. When his eyes fluttered open, she was there. "You crying again, girl?" he rasped. "Not anymore," she replied with a watery laugh. His gaze shifted, locking onto Elliot, who stood just inside the door, uncertain. "You called him?" Thomas asked, voice rough. Selena shook her head. "Mom did." Thomas looked at Elliot for a long moment. Then, without a word, he gave a single, slow nod. It said everything and demanded nothing. When Thomas settled and slept that night, Selena and Elliot sat in the hospital's family lounge. The storm outside had lessened. The rain is now a soft tapping, the wind a distant murmur. Inside, the overhead fluorescents buzzed with faint fatigue. Selena sat with her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I thought I was done with this fear," she murmured. "The kind that splits you open from the inside." "You're never really done," Elliot said quietly. "Not with the people you love." She looked at him then, raw and stripped of every mask. "I loved you once," she said. He didn't flinch, more than anything. "I know you did," she said. "That's what made it so hard when you left." He nodded. "And I know now that leaving was the worst thing I've ever done, even if I thought it was mercy." She shook her head. "Don't say that. Not here, not now." "I have to," he replied, his voice firm but not forceful, "because this is the first time in years that something feels right." She blinked, once, twice, then looked away. "You held my hand," she said after a pause, "when I was about to fall apart. You didn't have to." He leaned in, his voice gentle. "That's what family does." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then slowly, tentatively, she reached out and placed her hand in his. "I want to believe you," she said. I'll spend the rest of my life ensuring you can." They sat like that for a while, quiet, still, wrapped in the fragile peace that only comes after surviving a storm. Back at home the next day, the rain was gone. The children tiptoed around the house, drawing cards for their grandfather, filling the air with whispers and glitter. Grayson stayed through it all. He read to Noah, carried groceries in the crook of one arm, and tightened a loose faucet without being asked. He didn't overstep. He didn't announce his presence. He just stayed. And that night, when the house was finally still, Selena stepped out onto the porch. The sky had cleared into a velvet hush. Stars pricked across its surface like tiny compass points. Elliot followed with 2 mugs of tea. "You're not who you used to be," she said, watching the sky. He stood beside her. "Neither are you." They didn't kiss. They didn't reach for each other. But when she turned to go back inside, she left the door open behind her. And Elliot, without asking, followed. The house had begun to breathe again. There was a rhythm to healing, Selena had come to learn. It didn't arrive with grand gestures or declarations. It slipped in quietly through the scent of fresh laundry folded just before noon, through Isaiah's steady breath as he napped on the couch, through the low hum of the dishwasher, through the sight of Elliot kneeling in the hallway, tying a shoelace without needing to be asked. It was this quiet familiarity that startled her most. Elliot hadn't left since the hospital. Not in the way he used to. Not in spirit. He came early, stayed late. I picked up milk, fixed the broken hinge on Ava's dresser, and sat through Simone's puppet shows with the reverence usually reserved for operas. He didn't hover. He didn't rush. He just remained. That morning, the house was busy in the way only a school day could be. Backpacks flung open, breakfast half-eaten, socks unmatched, pencils missing. "Leo, your shoes are in the fridge again," Ava shouted from the kitchen, exasperated. "Simone, we cannot bring worms to school," Selena called, pulling the lid off a mason jar. Isaiah wandered in circles, holding a banana he had no intention of eating. And in the middle of it all, Elliot stood calmly pouring juice into 4 small travel cups, labeling them with a black marker, A-L-S-I. Selena watched him from the doorway. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He looked like he belonged, not because the house had welcomed him, but because he had learned how to be part of its chaos without asking to be the center of it. Later that day, after the school drop-offs, dentist appointments, and the 1,000 tiny tasks that made up their hours, Selena found herself alone in the laundry room. The hum of the dryer filled the space with a low warmth. Her hands moved automatically, sort, fold, stack. But her mind drifted, as it had so often lately, to the memory of who she used to be. She danced barefoot in this room, music blaring, a baby wrapped to her chest, another crawling at her feet. She cried into freshly dried towels because she didn't know if she could do it again the next day. And now, there was this space, this breath, this unfamiliar flicker of something frightening and profoundly tender. The door creaked open softly. "You all right?" Elliot asked, holding a basket of towels. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she nodded toward the shelf. "Can you pass me the lavender spray?" He did, and their fingers brushed for half a second. "I've been thinking," she said after a long pause, not looking at him. "About what you said, about wanting to walk beside me." Elliot waited. "I want to believe it," she said. "I do. But belief doesn't live in words anymore, Elliot. It lives in the hours between school drop-off and dinner. It lives in dentist chairs, sleepless nights, and cereal spills. It lives in the quiet. You understand?" He nodded. That's where I want to be. She folded the last towel and placed it on top of the stack. Then stay. Not just when it's easy. Not just when it's soft. He took a step closer, especially when it's not. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Noah tangled in a blanket like a cocoon. Ava, with her glasses still on. Simone curled in a nest of stuffed animals. Leo snoring against the footboard. Selena stepped onto the back porch. The air was cool, and the wind carried the scent of earth and damp leaves. Summer had begun to loosen its grip. Elliot joined her with 2 mugs in hand. They sat silently on the porch swing for a while, the old wood groaning beneath them like an old friend sighing at the end of the day. "I used to imagine this," he said finally. "This moment. Just us. Quiet. Nothing big. Just here." She looked at him, her features soft in the low light. "Did you imagine it before you left? Or only after you realized what you'd lost?" He turned toward her. "Only after I realized it wasn't mine to imagine anymore." Selena didn't reply right away. She let the silence stretch. Then, almost absently, she said, "Ava wrote a poem about you." Elliot stilled. "She didn't know she was writing about you," Selena added. "But I did." "What did it say?" Selena took a slow sip of tea. It said, "I wonder what it means to miss someone you've never met, but feel like you've known your whole life." Elliot's eyes dropped to his hands. "I didn't know," he said again, "but I should have." "She forgives easily," Selena said. "Leo, too. Simone will draw you with 6 arms before she trusts you. And Isaiah watches more than he speaks. He'll test you when you least expect it." "I'll be ready." Selena's gaze didn't soften, but it didn't harden either. It remained steady. "You've missed 1,000 days," she said quietly. "You'll never get them back." "I know. But there are still days ahead." He nodded, and for a long time, they didn't speak again. But they stayed there, shoulders nearly touching. 2 mugs growing cold, the night stretching wide around them. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even hope. But it was something. A pause between pages, a breath before the following line. And sometimes, that's where love begins again. Autumn crept into New Orleans with a kind of quiet grace, like a letter slipped under the door, unannounced but unmistakable. The air had lost its summer weight, replaced by something thinner, more extraordinary, tinged with cinnamon from the corner bakery and the distant smoke of someone's backyard fire pit. The magnolia leaves had begun their slow surrender, drifting down like time had softened. Inside the Miller house, Saturday morning was unraveling in its usual disorganized charm. Ava was curled on the armchair, with a blanket and a book thick enough to be used as a doorstop. Leo was on the floor with wires, cardboard, and fierce concentration. His self-declared recycling robot now included half a spatula and 3 batteries taped together. Simone, meanwhile, had found her muse in the form of her mother's lipstick and the hallway mirror. And, blissfully unconcerned, Isaiah sat at the kitchen counter, slowly licking peanut butter from a spoon, legs swinging rhythmically. Selena stood at the sink, her fingers in warm water, watching the reflection of her life through the window over the sink. Outside, Elliot was in the backyard, hammer in hand, adjusting the final rung of the treehouse ladder. Thomas stood a few feet away, offering instructions with the solemn dignity of a man who'd built half this neighborhood before most of the trees had fully grown. Their voices rose and fell in low conversation, punctuated by shared laughter, the kind that only came when men who had once mistrusted each other now worked in tandem. Selena dried her hands slowly. Something about this scene Elliot and her father, the children alive with noise and questions. Her kitchen full of motion and memory made her breath catch. Not from grief, from something more challenging to hold. Peace. She had forgotten how heavy stillness could be when it carried contentment. When the treehouse was officially deemed climbable and snack-approved, the children had already begun a campaign to move in permanently. They dragged up pillows and flashlights, cartons of crackers, picture books, and a jar of trail mix that mysteriously contained more marshmallows than anything else. Ava declared herself mayor. Leo appointed himself chief of engineering. Simone sketched a flag from glitter paper, and Isaiah collected acorns with the seriousness of a small scholar preparing a winter harvest. Elliot stood below them, arms crossed, watching his universe spiral upward into laughter and small feet thumping across wooden planks. Selena came out with lemonade. "They've claimed it," she said, handing him a glass. "I had a feeling they would," Elliot replied. Leo already tried to install a pulley system for snacks. "He's resourceful. He's exhausting," Elliot said, smiling. "But yeah, he's amazing." They stood shoulder to shoulder in the fading light, gazing at the treehouse. Neither said what hung between them, that this was what they'd missed, that this ordinary, unremarkable, chaotic, and beautiful had once felt too far away to dream of. "I forgot what it was like," Elliot said after a long silence. "To feel rooted." Selena tilted her head toward him. "That's not a word I ever thought I'd hear you use." "I know." He paused. "But here I am, watering plants, building ladders, making lunches with heart-shaped sandwich cutters." She smiled at that, but her voice was quiet. "You're doing more than showing up." "I want to stay," he said. A long breath passed between them. Selena sat on the porch step, motioning for him to do the same. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the grass, gilding the treehouse in amber light. "My mom used to tell me," she said, resting her elbows on her knees, "that the hardest part of rebuilding wasn't the foundation. It was trusting the walls to hold again." Elliot looked at her gently. "And are they?" "Some days," she admitted. "Some moments. When Isaiah falls asleep on your chest. When you let Simone paint your shoes. When you remember who likes their apple slices peeled." He chuckled. "That was a high-stakes guess." "She still talks about it," Selena said, her eyes distant. "That you listened." "I'm trying," he said. She nodded slowly. "And it's showing." The door creaked open behind them. Thomas stepped out, wiping his hands with a rag. There was a look in his eyes that wasn't quite approval, but something adjacent. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of it. "Treehouse passed inspection," he announced. Elliot stood. "Thank you for helping." Thomas shrugged. "You listened. Most don't." Then he nodded toward the children, still giggling in the treehouse's soft glow. "Keep showing up," he said, before turning back inside. The screen door snapped shut behind him. Selena looked at Elliot, her gaze unreadable. "You earned that," she said. "Only took 10 years and a few screws." Bah. She didn't laugh, but she didn't look away either. Later that evening, as the sky gave itself over to stars and bedtime routines began their winding descent, Elliot found himself in the living room, folding laundry beside Selena. The children had each fallen asleep in their way. Ava, with a book open on her chest. Leo with his arms spread like a pilot mid-flight. Simone tangled in tulle and paper crowns. Isaiah curled beneath a quilt he had dragged from the couch. Elliot folded a tiny shirt and held it up. "I missed this," he said. "Not just the firsts, the small things." Selena didn't respond. She was folding too a pair of socks, a blanket, but her hands moved more slowly now. I was afraid, he continued, that if I came back, I'd be nothing but a reminder of what was lost. You are, she said softly, but you're also something else. He waited. You're the person who's still here, she said. And that matters more than I thought it would. When the laundry was done and the lights dimmed, she walked him to the door as she had every night. But tonight, she didn't stop at the threshold. Instead, she stepped outside with him, barefoot on the porch, the wood warm beneath her feet. They stood in the dark, beneath the hush of a southern autumn, the kind that doesn't come in blazes, but in breaths. And when she turned slightly toward him, her voice was almost too soft to hear. Come back tomorrow, she said. Elliot nodded once. He didn't have to say a word. The next morning unfolded gently, as if the house had decided to exhale. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, laying pale gold across the hardwood floor. The scent of cinnamon and warm butter drifted from the kitchen, mingling with soft humming Avas, likely as she laid out napkins with a kind of practiced ceremony. Isaiah was perched on a stool, legs swinging, watching the toaster with wide-eyed reverence, as though it might produce something more than bread. Selena moved through the kitchen barefoot, sleeves rolled to her elbows, her movements unhurried but deliberate. She was folding pancake batter into a bowl when Elliot appeared at the back door, holding a small potted rosemary plant. For the window, he said, stepping inside. I figured the basil was feeling lonely. She glanced at the gift, plain, fragrant, rooted. A quiet offering. She nodded once, reaching for it without hesitation, placing it beside the sink. It'll do, she said, not unkindly. He smiled, hanging his coat on the back of a chair. And just like that, the rhythm of morning absorbed him. No ceremony, no threshold to cross, just the easy weight of someone who had learned the map of their daily life by heart. After breakfast, Elliot helped Simone finish gluing popsicle sticks to her shoebox diorama of a futuristic fairy village, a project that sparkled with glue and impossible ambition. Meanwhile, Leo insisted on rebuilding the pulley system for the treehouse, this time with more string and significantly more risk. Ava asked for help rehearsing a poem for Sunday's church recital, and Isaiah, with cheeks full of toast, quietly asked if Elliot would tie his shoes. He did slowly, twice over, the laces coming loose because Isaiah couldn't stand still. By mid-morning, the house had shifted into that half-quiet lull, where socks were finally found, jackets zipped, and the last piece of toast buttered. Selena grabbed her keys. We need groceries, she said. I'll take the twins. I'll come, Elliot offered. She didn't answer, but she handed him the list. The grocery store wasn't crowded, but buzzed with the sleepy chaos of weekend errands. Simone rode on the cart's edge, dangerously close to the cereal aisle. Leo narrated the trip as if hosting a documentary. Here we see the wild mother selecting the rarest bananas. Selena flicked his ear lightly. Keep that up, and you'll be picking rice grain by grain. Elliot trailed behind them, carrying the heavy bag of apples, and listened, quietly amused, as Simone asked why carrots were orange and whether jelly beans counted as protein. At checkout, Selena reached into her bag for her wallet, only to find a crumpled receipt, a pacifier from 2 years ago, and a toy dinosaur with a missing leg. She sighed. Elliot, already beside her, offered his card without a word. She hesitated. I'll pay you back, she said, barely above a whisper. He shook his head gently. You don't have to. She didn't argue further but turned to him when they reached the car. It's not about the money. You know that, right? I do. I just... She looked down at the bags between them. I've carried this for so long. The weight, the details, remembering if we're out of milk, knowing who likes which peanut butter. And now you're here, and it's different, he finished for her. Lighter, she admitted. But it scares me. He nodded. Because what if I drop it? Yes. They stood there momentarily. The car's back door open, the children laughing in the back seat, their voices muffled by the glass. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't a wound. It was simply the truth, spoken without ceremony. I won't promise I won't make mistakes, Elliot said, but I will carry it with you even when it's heavy, especially then. She looked at him, and in that glance, something subtle shifted. Not forgiveness, not certainty, but a loosening of something that had been wound too tight for too long. Back home, while the children scattered into their post-lunch rituals, Leo tinkering with a flashlight, Simone attempting to braid Ava's hair while Ava tried to recite her poem. Selena sat at the dining table, sorting through the week's bills. Elliot brought her tea without being asked. When she looked up, her voice was low. Isaiah's birthday is next week. I know. He asked for a cake shaped like a dinosaur spaceship. Elliot didn't blink. I'll watch every YouTube tutorial in existence. She almost smiled. And he wants to invite his whole class, she added, eyes flicking toward the pile of envelopes, which is 23 kids, plus parents. I'll buy extra napkins. You'll need armor. I'll wear a helmet. This time, she did smile. It came slowly, hesitantly, like sunlight between clouds, but it was there. While the children prepared for bed that evening, Elliot lingered in the living room, sitting on the rug, while Simone painted his fingernails with something purple and sparkly. He didn't flinch. When she announced he was now officially magical, he bowed solemnly. Selena leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching him. Later, she stepped outside when the house had fallen quiet, and only the porch light remained. Elliot followed, as he always did now, carrying 2 cups of tea. They sat in silence for a long while. You're folding into them, she said eventually. He looked at her. Is that a good thing? It means they'll miss you if you go. I won't go. She didn't answer, but she didn't pull away when his knee brushed against hers beneath the swing. The stars blinked slowly above them, the treehouse still faintly lit by glow sticks and leftover dreams. Somewhere in the house, one of the children turned over in sleep, murmuring half a song. And beneath all of it, beneath the quiet and shared breath, Selena felt the faint, unmistakable echo of something soft returning. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of belonging. The sky was a soft blur of gray that morning, the overcast that made the whole world feel quieter, as though the clouds were asking everyone to speak just a little more gently. Selena stood in front of the living room window, steaming mug in hand, watching as Leo and Isaiah tried to race paper boats down the shallow stream of water pooling along the curb. Simone had her sleeves rolled to her elbows and was crouched beside them with a stick, nudging the boats when they caught on leaves. Ava, as always, lingered just behind them, half part observer, half part poet, her fingers tracing invisible patterns against the misted glass. The house was peaceful, in a way that came not from silence, but rhythm, knowing who needed honey in their tea and which drawer still hid the last crayon stub of burnt orange. Behind her, she heard the unmistakable creak of the hallway floorboard. Elliot. He entered the room with that now familiar ease, carrying 2 folded blankets and a faint scent of cedar and rain. It's going to pour, he said, nodding toward the window. They won't come in until they're soaked through, Selena replied, her voice calm. Elliot smiled and placed the blankets on the couch. I'll get towels. She watched him go. That had become their language, small tasks, spoken in movement, shared responsibilities, and gestures that once belonged to other versions of themselves, but now felt entirely remade. When he returned, he carried towels and a paper roll to begin crafting decorations for Isaiah's upcoming birthday. The kitchen had already been turned into an artistic battlefield where Ava and Simone had spent the better part of the morning debating the correct number of stars that belonged on a space cake. Leo had nominated himself as mission commander. Isaiah wanted to wear a cape. Elliot knelt beside the table, unrolling the paper like a man drawing battle plans. We'll need at least 3 galaxies, he said, glancing at the kids, and 1 alien with 6 eyes. 7, Isaiah corrected him solemnly. Because the more eyes, the better the hugs. Selena leaned against the doorframe and watched them. This wasn't about redemption. It wasn't about an apology. It was about seeing someone make room for the absurd, beautiful, and ordinary all at once, and doing so without flinching. That evening, the smell of vanilla and cocoa hung in the air. The cake was in the oven. Elliot stood at the sink, sleeves pushed up, washing dishes, while Isaiah danced beside him in a cape made from an old bedsheet, trailing glitter and pipe cleaners like a comet. Selena stood beside the counter, carefully pouring frosting into a bowl, stirring slowly, watching how Isaiah leaned into Elliot's side when he laughed. The way Elliot didn't stiffen. He looked at her over Isaiah's head, not with hope, but with quiet anchoring. It had taken time. It was still taking time. But there was something different in how the light caught his face now. Something open, unguarded. The man she once knew had been brilliant and scared, always chasing something he couldn't name. This man, the one before her, now seemed to know exactly where he was. Selena stepped onto the back porch after the children were tucked into bed, glowing from the joy of pre-birthday anticipation and sugar-fueled bedtime stories. The air was thick with moisture, and the world smelled of wet earth and warm wood. Elliot joined her moments later, holding a candle in a jar. It's habit now, he said. I light one every time we sit here. Selena took it from his hand and placed it on the table between them. The flame flickered briefly before settling. I used to light candles when they were babies, she said, almost absently. After they fell asleep. Just for myself. One small, steady thing. He sat across from her. I'm sorry you had to do it all alone. She didn't respond. The wind stirred the hem of her dress. I think part of me, she said slowly, believed that if I just kept going, if I was strong enough, steady enough, it wouldn't matter that you left. It always mattered, he said, even when I pretended it didn't. Especially then. She looked at him. Her eyes weren't sharp. They weren't sad. They were still. I don't need you to make up for the past, she said. I don't need promises or poetry. I don't have either, he said. Just a toolbox, an extra pair of hands, and all the hours I still have left. That made her laugh, quiet and sudden, surprising even her. I want to try something, she said after a moment. It might be too soon. It might be nothing. Elliot sat up straighter. Tell me. Next week, she began. There's a family event at school. They want volunteers for the activity booths. And usually, it's just me. But this year, I thought maybe... Us, he finished. She nodded. Then we'll be there, he said. And it was the way he said we that made her chest ache, not with pain, but with something softer, something growing. Later, when the candle had burned low and the rain began again, soft and steady, Selena stood in the doorway. Elliot paused behind her, hand resting lightly on the frame. She turned toward him, brushing her hair from her face. They're starting to call you Dad, More often, she said. You noticed? He nodded, his voice barely audible. I did. They don't say it like a title, she said. They say it like it's always been true. He looked down, overwhelmed by its simplicity. They teach me how to be it every day. Selena stepped back inside, leaving the door open behind her. Elliot followed. And for the first time, he didn't feel like he was entering. He felt like he was already home. The morning of Isaiah's birthday began not with balloons or streamers, but with the unmistakable sound of tiny feet thudding down the hallway, followed by an exuberant voice shouting, I'm 5 3/4 now. Sha. Selena had barely opened her eyes before Isaiah launched himself onto the bed, arms spread wide, his hair sticking in every direction like the start of fireworks. Already half awake beside her, Elliot let out a groggy laugh as Isaiah landed squarely between them, cape and all. Technically, Selena murmured, brushing a stray thread of gold from his forehead, you're 5 1/2. The 3/4 part comes later. Isaiah frowned, considered it deeply, then declared, Well, I feel taller. Selena smiled, pulling him into a sleepy hug. Then maybe you are. In the kitchen, Ava was already measuring flour with the seriousness of a lab technician. Simone stood on a stool before the refrigerator, rearranging magnetic letters to spell party zone, though she insisted it looked better as zone partie. Leo had constructed a launch pad from cereal boxes and string in full commander mode, directing his siblings to assemble a rocket-shaped piñata. Elliot moved easily among them, apron on, sleeves rolled, humming under his breath as he whipped frosting by hand. Selena watched him from the kitchen doorway, still holding her coffee, her hair tied in a loose braid that trailed over her shoulder. For a brief, unguarded moment, she saw a life she hadn't dared imagine for years. Not just stability, not just help, but presence, willingness, joy. The backyard had been transformed overnight. Streamers fluttered from the treehouse balcony. Stars and planets cut from cardboard hung between branches like a suspended galaxy. A picnic table was covered in a plastic tablecloth that shimmered like moonlight, and handmade signs labeled the games. Alien ring toss, pin the tail on the rocket, and Leo's proudest invention, Astro Egg Relay. Guests began to arrive in waves. Parents from Isaiah's class with shy smiles and arms full of wrapped gifts. Children with face paint and tangled capes. The yard pulsed with laughter, glitter, and the giddy madness of 23 children, all chasing sugar and each other. Selena moved through it all like the center of a quiet orbit, checking juice cups, tying shoelaces, comforting one child who tripped on the steps and another who dropped their cupcake. She wasn't frantic. She wasn't flustered. She was something rarer, grounded. Elliot noticed it even as he ran the ring toss with several volunteers. Every time he looked for her, she was already there, kneeling beside a crying child, wiping chocolate from someone's cheek, lifting Isaiah into the air when he squealed with delight at his spaceship cake. Later, when the piñata exploded in a shower of candy and confetti, and the children fell upon it like archaeologists on buried treasure, Selena stood on the porch with a quiet smile, her arms folded lightly over her chest. Elliot approached her, holding 2 paper cups of lemonade. You built a galaxy, he said. She raised a brow. I had help. You had a vision, he corrected. She took the cup, her fingers brushing his. Maybe, but the real magic was in the execution. He looked out across the yard, where Simone was assigning candy trade rules. Ava sat reading to a group of enthralled toddlers, and Leo attempted to fit 3 lollipops in his mouth at once. Isaiah ran toward the treehouse, shouting about meteors, his cape trailing behind him. They're happy. Elliot said. They're resilient, Selena replied. Happiness is just a side effect. He glanced at her. And you? She didn't answer immediately. She sipped the lemonade, and the tartness ground her. I think, she said finally, I'm learning to let go of the idea that everything has to be perfect before I can feel peace. He nodded, not pushing further. As the sun set, the sky shifted to soft rose and peach. Guests began to trickle away, waving from car windows, carrying tired children and leftover cupcakes. The house filled again with the warm echo of retreating noise shoes left by the door, laughter receding into bedrooms, water running in the bathroom sink. Selena stood in the hallway, watching Elliot help Isaiah out of his cape. The boy leaned into him easily, his voice already thick with sleep. Did you have fun today? Elliot asked. Isaiah nodded solemnly. Best birthday ever. When he was finally tucked in, the others scattered across their beds. Selena returned to the living room, where Elliot sat amid the day's remains, stray streamers, crumpled wrapping paper, half-inflated balloons. She picked up a paper star and turned it slowly in her hands. Thank you, she said softly. He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. For what? For being part of the mess, she said. For not just showing up when it's easy. Today was a lot. I like the lot, he said. Even the sticky parts. She sat beside him, close enough to feel his warmth, but not yet touching. You know, she said, looking down at the star, when I first found out I was having 4, I was terrified. Not because I didn't want them, but because I thought I'd always be outnumbered. I thought I'd have to be everything, all the time. And now? I'm still outnumbered. She smiled faintly. But it doesn't feel like drowning anymore. It feels like living. He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on her hands. Do you ever think, he asked, that the hard parts make the rest more vivid? She nodded slowly. I do. Their eyes met, and something shifted again in the quiet that followed, not grand or dramatic, just a deepening, a recognition. Not just of what had been lost, but of what had, impossibly, been rebuilt. The porch light flickered outside. The dishwasher hummed in the background. Leo giggled somewhere upstairs, perhaps dreaming of galaxies and cake. And downstairs, on a worn couch between stars and crumbs, 2 people sat in the aftermath of joy, slowly, deliberately learning how to hold something fragile without letting it slip through their fingers. ChatGPT deny. Rain returned the next morning, not in a rush, but in quiet persistence, tapping gently against the window panes as if reminding the house to slow down. Everything inside seemed to move more softly because of it, the children's footsteps muffled by rugs, the kettle's whistle lower than usual, voices wrapped in the hush that follows a full day of celebration. Selena stood at the stove, stirring oatmeal with one hand, her other gently resting on the counter beside a damp dishcloth. She was still wearing the oversized flannel shirt she'd fallen asleep in, its sleeves pushed up, her braid loose from sleep. Outside, the sky stretched pale and unpromising, but the scent of cinnamon and apples carried warmth inside. Elliot appeared behind her, quiet, as he often did now, not looming, never abrupt. He had developed a way of entering rooms that felt like exhaling. He leaned against the doorframe momentarily, watching her, then crossed the room to fill 2 mugs with coffee, one splash of oat milk in hers, black in his. You slept? He asked, handing her the mug. She nodded, more than I thought I would. Birthday aftermath isn't for the weak. No, she said, sipping, but it's a good kind of tired. They stood there momentarily, listening to the rhythmic patter of rain and the quiet rustle of the children stirring in the next room. Ava was already padding through the hallway, hair a tangled halo around her head, book tucked under her arm like a shield. Simone followed, still half dreaming, blinking at the world as though it were slowly coming into focus. "Can we stay home today?" Simone asked softly, curling into the corner of the couch without waiting for permission. "It's Sunday," Selena said gently. "There's nowhere we need to be." The children didn't cheer. They sighed, relieved, the kind of relief that comes only when safety has become routine. Elliot sat on the floor beside Isaiah, drawing a rocket ship with thick black lines, each scribble deliberate. Leo joined them with a box of mismatched crayons, organizing by color, and then changing his mind halfway through. The living room became a nest of quiet industry artworks, scattered like offerings, cups of warm milk cooling on coasters, the rain steady in loyalty. Selena watched them from the armchair, her fingers wrapped around the warmth of her mug, her eyes trailing the lines of Elliot's posture as he leaned over to tie a knot in Leo's yarn bracelet, Simone's feet resting against his leg like it was the most natural thing in the world. It didn't look temporary anymore. Later that afternoon, the house took on the rhythm of a lazy, rain-soaked day. Card games at the dining table, a movie half-watched and mostly talked over, grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch, and long pauses where no one needed to fill the silence. Elliot helped Simone build a cardboard dollhouse, each room decorated in wild patterns of paper scraps and old stickers. He let her explain the floor plan, down to the family of paper pets who lived there, and he didn't interrupt once. Selena sat nearby with Ava, helping her untangle the metaphor in a poem she'd written about shadows and stars. Ava, always precise, always reaching for meaning, nodded slowly as her mother explained how not all dark things are frightening, some are simply waiting to be understood. As the sky darkened again, Elliot offered to cook dinner. Selena hesitated. "You sure?" He nodded. "They trust me with glitter and glue guns. I think I can handle pasta." She left him in his kitchen with Isaiah perched on a stool, peeling garlic with sticky fingers, narrating each clove's journey like a bedtime story. Selena slipped away upstairs, the creak of the stairs familiar beneath her steps. She stood in her bedroom doorway for a long moment, looking at the rain-speckled glass. The streetlights had begun to glow, soft and diffused through the mist. Her breath caught, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming quiet of contentment. She hadn't expected it to return like this. Slowly. Not like a wave, but like light inching across a room at sunrise. When she returned downstairs, dinner was already on the table, simple, warm, enough. The children ate with the hunger only found in those who laughed all day. Elliot handed her a plate without fanfare. His hand brushed hers, and she didn't pull away. After the dishes were cleared, pajamas were found, and teeth were brushed in fits and starts. Elliot helped Leo search for his missing astronaut sock, while Simone lined up her stuffed animals in bed with precise choreography. Ava was already beneath her blanket, nose deep in a book, while Isaiah had fallen asleep on the couch mid-sentence, his arms around a cushion as if it were his ship to dreamland. Selena stood in the hallway, watching Elliot scoop Isaiah into his arms with practiced ease. She followed him upstairs, waited as he tucked the boy in gently, then leaned against the doorway while Elliot adjusted the blanket. "I forget how light they are when they sleep," he whispered. Selena smiled faintly. "I forget how much they grow while they do." Downstairs again, the house exhaled. The storm outside had dulled to a whisper, and every room held that intimate stillness, only when everyone inside surrendered to rest. Elliot settled onto the porch swing with a blanket. Selena followed, cup of herbal tea in hand, the fabric of her sweater clinging softly to her skin in the damp air. The porch light was dim, casting everything in a hush. The rain had stopped, but the world still smelled of it: wet pavement, damp leaves, something clean and steady. "I kept thinking," he said after a long pause, "that showing up would be enough. That if I just stayed, did the work, proved I wasn't leaving, it would fix what I broke." She didn't interrupt. "But I'm starting to see," he continued, "that it's not about fixing anything. It's about choosing, over and over, even when it's quiet, even when there's nothing to say." Selina looked down at her cup, her thumb tracing the rim slowly. "That's what love becomes, I think. Not a rescue, a rhythm." He turned toward her. "And are we in step?" "Some days more than others," she said. "But you're not walking behind anymore. That counts for something." He reached out cautiously, his hand resting beside hers on the bench, and not touching or asking, but waiting. She looked at their hands, then at him, and slowly, without ceremony, she shifted her fingers until they touched palm to palm, quiet and open. Not a promise, not yet, but something far more enduring. It began with a photograph. Ava had been assigned a school project, My Family Through the Seasons, and was determined to find pictures from each phase of her childhood. She'd taken to the task with quiet intensity, flipping through dusty photo boxes, old albums, even the neglected folders buried in Selina's email from over a decade ago. What she hadn't expected, however, was to discover a picture she didn't remember ever taking. It was of Selina and Elliot. The photo was slightly grainy, snapped in the hallway of their old apartment, long before the divorce, before the late nights and silent dinners. Elliot was laughing, shoulders bent forward, holding a swaddled Ava in his arms. Selina stood close beside him, her hand resting on his back, her expression unguarded. The lighting was poor, the frame was crooked, but something about it felt whole. Ava found her mother in the kitchen and held the photo without a word. Selina froze. Her breath hitched in that delicate place just beneath the ribs. "I don't remember this," Ava said. "I do," Selina replied quietly. "It was the day we brought you home." There was no sadness in her voice, just a deep, settled ache, the kind you carry gently, like a beautiful and sharp heirloom. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house had folded into its evening hush, Selina sat on the porch alone, the photo resting on her lap. Elliot found her barefoot, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes distant, but not empty. He sat beside her without speaking. The air was cool, and the wind carried the scent of lavender from the garden bed. She handed him the photo. He stared at it for a long moment. "I remember this shirt," he said softly. "It had a small hole near the collar I never got around to mending." Selina smiled faintly. "You always said you'd fix things later." His gaze didn't leave the photo. "I thought I had more time." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "We both did." They sat there silently, letting the stillness do what words couldn't. Then, finally, she said, "I think Ava needed to see this." "And you?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Me too." In the days that followed, something shifted, not dramatic, not spoken aloud, but present nonetheless. It lingered in the small moments, the way Elliot began to leave his keys in the tray by the door, the way his coat hung beside hers, no longer temporary. Selina began to lean into his presence, not away from it. They began to cook dinner together more often, their movements synchronized without discussion. One would chop vegetables, while the other stirred the sauce. One would pour water while the other would salt the pasta. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. But the quiet between them had changed shape from strained to soft, from hesitant to familiar. One evening, after the children had gone to bed early, from an unexpected power outage that turned bath time into candle-lit storytelling, Elliot found Selena in the backyard, barefoot in the grass, her head tilted toward the sky. The stars had come out full, unfazed by whatever darkness descended on the street. The air was clean in the way only post-storm nights could be. "They're brighter here," she said. He stepped closer, standing beside her. "Or maybe we're just still enough to notice them." She glanced at him. "Stillness wasn't your thing before." "It wasn't," he agreed. "But maybe I was looking in the wrong direction." She tilted her head, not quite smiling, not quite challenging. "And now?" "I see a life," he said, "not a blueprint." Selena said nothing, but she didn't step away. Simone asked Elliot if he could attend her school's Dad and Donuts breakfast the next day. The question was so matter-of-fact, so utterly trusting, that it stopped him cold. "Of course," he answered, after only the briefest of pauses. Selena watched from the hallway, unseen. Her heart tightened not from pain, but from the delicate pressure of something that had once been lost, inching its way back into the light. That evening, after dishes had been washed and stories read, Selena stood beside Elliot as they packed school lunches. She handed him apple slices, and he slipped them into Ziploc bags without looking. "They're starting to expect you," she said. He nodded. "I know." "It's not a game," she added. "I don't play games anymore." Selena leaned against the counter, arms folded. "I still haven't forgotten everything. Or forgiven." "I wouldn't want you to," he said. "The forgetting was how we fell apart." She met his gaze then, firm, unwavering. "They're watching us, Elliot, every day." "I know," he said again. "That's why I keep showing up." For the first time, she didn't argue. That weekend, Leo drew a family portrait. He proudly showed it to Selena. 5 uneven stick figures, all holding hands, smiles wide and lopsided. Between Selena and the children stood a 6th figure, taller, wearing a cape. "It's you," Leo said to Elliot, "because you're the helper now. And helpers always wear capes." Elliot looked at the drawing, stunned. "Is that what you see me as?" Leo shrugged. "You don't yell, and you fix stuff, and you made waffles on my birthday. That's kind of what helpers do." Selena, watching the exchange, said nothing, but her fingers curled slightly at her sides, as if holding something fragile, something that might grow wings if given the space. That night, as they stood again on the porch, the wind brushing past them like an old friend, Selena turned to Elliot and said quietly, "If you're staying, you'll need your drawer." Elliot looked at her, uncertain. She didn't laugh, didn't tease. "You'll still have to earn it," she added. "But I'm tired of pretending this isn't real." He swallowed hard, voice low. "So am I." And between them, something unspoken gave way for the first time, like the first roots beneath thawed soil, anchoring themselves quietly, unseen but sure. It began with a quiet rain, one March evening. Not a storm that came crashing down to wash the world clean, but a gentle, persistent drizzle that softened everything it touched. The kind of rain that wrapped the house in a hush, like a veil drawn over the day. Selena stood in the kitchen, both hands wrapped around a steaming cup of ginger tea. She wasn't looking out at the sky. She looked at the third drawer beneath the countertop, which Elliot had cleared out earlier that morning. It was just a drawer, old wood, a slightly loose handle. But now it held a toothbrush, a razor, and the wristwatch Elliot used to wear daily in San Diego. Small things, unremarkable, and yet they spoke louder than words ever could. The back door opened. A breeze slipped in, carrying the smell of damp earth. Elliot stepped inside, his raincoat draped over one shoulder, shoes wet and leaving faint prints on the hardwood floor. He caught her gaze as he entered. Just a second, barely more. But it was enough. "I went to the store," he said sheepishly. "Ava said we were out of the mint toothpaste she likes." "She won't use anything else," Selena replied, setting the cup down gently. Her voice was calm, even. Elliot unpacked the grocery bag, laying out each item on the table, as if proving through oat milk and granola that he belonged. But his eyes kept flicking back to her, as if he were afraid that looking away for too long might break whatever fragile thing was forming between them. "That drawer," Selena began quietly. Elliot paused, waiting. "You used to have a place here," she said slowly, "before you left." He nodded, his voice nearly lost in the rain. "I remember. And now that you're back, I need to believe it's not just about unpacking your things, that you're choosing to stay." The words landed softly but firmly between them. Not a challenge, a truth that asked to be met with another. Elliot took a step forward, no sudden movement, no assumptions, just a quiet response. "I don't need a drawer. I need you to know I'm not going anywhere." Selena didn't answer right away. She looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing him not in her mind, but with her eyes. Then she turned away and walked into the living room, leaving him in the soft light of the kitchen, surrounded by grocery bags and the lingering scent of ginger tea. He didn't follow, not yet. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep, Selena returned to the living room where Elliot sat reading under the warm glow of a lamp. She curled into the armchair across from him, legs tucked beneath her, silent. Just there. After a while, Elliot closed his book. "Don't you want to ask?" She looked up. "About the time I was gone," he said. "You never asked." "I thought," she said, "if you ever wanted to talk about it, you would." He looked down at the space between them, no longer silent, just waiting. "At first," he began, "I felt relief. San Diego was clean and quiet, no memories clinging to the walls. I worked too much, got promoted. Everyone said I was doing great. But every night, I'd come home to an apartment that didn't feel like home. Just absence." Selena said nothing. Her eyes never left his. "And then one morning," he continued, "I missed the sound of little feet on the hallway floor. I missed you sighing as you looked for Leo's socks, missed the way you rubbed Ava's back when she had bad dreams. I even missed the things that used to frustrate me." His voice dropped, softer now. "I missed you." Selena turned toward the window. The rain had quieted, leaving only silver mist on the glass. When she faced him again, her eyes shimmered. "Missing me isn't the same as coming back for the right reason." "I didn't return just because I missed you," he said. "I came back because I finally understood. Family isn't where you go when you feel empty. It's where you stay, even when things aren't easy." She didn't speak, but her silence didn't feel like a wall this time. Elliot stood and walked to where she sat, not rushing. He eased down beside her, the space between them shrinking slowly, not with grand gestures, but with quiet understanding. A long moment passed. Then Selena leaned her head against his shoulder. No words, no declarations, just presence. Two people, one room, and something once broken finding its shape again. No drama, no performance, just sincerity, and a stillness strong enough to hold through the weight of any storm. Spring folded into early summer, like a breath held just a second longer than expected. The house had settled into a rhythm. Not perfect, never that, but whole in the way a favorite sweater might be. Soft, familiar, slightly frayed in the corners, and irreplaceably yours. Selena stood on the back porch one morning, watching the twins argue whether ladybugs preferred strawberries or apples. Ava, dignified and amused, recorded their findings in a glittery notebook. Leo was inside, stringing yarn across door frames like booby traps for evil spies. And Isaiah? He had started painting again, quiet, slow brush strokes. No fanfare. Just color, where once there had only been stillness. She felt Elliot before she heard him. He stepped outside, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He handed one to her without speaking. No performance, just a gesture. One among thousands that had become their language. Isaiah asked if you'd help him with his clouds later, she said, wrapping her fingers around the warm ceramic. Elliot took a sip. I'm flattered. He's very particular about his clouds. Selena smiled, but her gaze stayed distant between the trees and the memory of who they had once been. Last week, she said after a pause, Simone told me she's not afraid of losing things anymore. Elliot looked at her quietly. She said, things come back sometimes. Not the same, but sometimes better. He nodded. She's right. Selena turned toward him, really seeing him. The tiny lines at the corners of his eyes. He held his shoulders differently, not in defense, but in openness. He was not the man who had left. He wasn't even the man who had returned. He was someone new, and somehow still the same, like sea glass, shaped by time and salt, still beautiful, but no longer sharp. I was afraid, she said quietly. I know, he answered, of forgiving. I was afraid too, he admitted, of not being allowed to. There was no need to fill the space between their words. The air was warm, the kind that hung heavy with lilac and the soft hum of cicadas. The kids were laughing, somewhere just beyond sight. Selena tilted her head slightly. What do we call this now? Elliot set his cup down. We don't have to name it yet. She raised a brow. But if we did, he added, maybe we'd call it a beginning. They spent the afternoon planting flowers by the kitchen windows, petunias, marigolds, lavender. The twins helped, shoveling dirt and arguing over placement. Ava designed handmade labels with watercolor strokes. Leo insisted on guarding the whole operation in his spy uniform, which included swimming goggles and a colander for a helmet. When Isaiah emerged with a canvas in hand, everyone paused. He held it up shyly. In the painting, the sky stretched wide in soft shades of blue, streaked with wispy clouds, some low and full, others feather-light. But it wasn't the clouds that made Selena catch her breath. It was the figures beneath them. 6, standing in a field of green, all holding hands. One of them held a paintbrush. Another wore a cape. One, unmistakably Selena, had a smile painted with careful care. And beside her stood a man with his hand on her shoulder. No title, no caption, just the picture. Isaiah looked at her, then at Elliot. I didn't know if it was okay to put you both in. Selena knelt beside him. It's more than okay. Selena lingered in the hallway after the kids had gone to bed that night, staring at the painting Isaiah had hung near the staircase. Elliot came up beside her, brushing his fingers lightly against her back. They see us, she whispered. They always have, he said. Selena turned to him. "Do you still feel like a visitor here?" Elliot met her eyes. "No," he said. "I feel like I've come home." They stood there for a long moment, the soft creak of the house settling around them, the kind of quiet that only exists when nothing is being withheld. She reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his. He didn't speak, didn't need to, because some stories don't end with declarations or fireworks. Some end with soil under your fingernails and a cup of lukewarm coffee on the railing, with a child's painting on the wall and laughter echoing down the hall, with a porch light left on, not as a signal of waiting, but as a welcome for someone who finally chose to stay. And two people stood side by side in that light, soft and ordinary, not trying to rewrite the past, just beginning again, exactly where they were. There are endings that arrive like thunder, sudden, loud, irreversible. But this wasn't one of them. Selena stood by the window of their new home, a modest craftsman at the edge of a quiet tree-lined street in Portland, Oregon. Morning light spilled in through gauzy curtains, catching flecks of dust that danced in the air like something magical, something weightless. The scent of fresh paint lingered on the walls, mingling with brewed coffee and the lemon balm growing in a clay pot by the sink. It had taken them a year to move, not because of logistics, but because healing had its calendar. They hadn't planned it. One day, Ava mentioned an art program. Elliot says the company would allow remote work, and Simone whispered she'd like to start somewhere without ghosts in the hallway. And so they did. Selena looked out at the front yard, where the twins were building what they proudly called a secret garden. Ava sat nearby under the shade of a young oak, sketching in a new notebook. Leo, never far from trouble, was duct-taping sticks into the shape of a dragon. Elliot knelt beside them all, sleeves rolled up, planting marigold seeds in a crooked row that would surely bloom sideways. It wasn't perfect, and yet it was everything. She stepped outside, bare feet pressing into the still damp porch. Elliot looked up and grinned. That easy, quiet kind of grin that didn't ask for anything in return. "Good morning," he said. She sat beside him, handing him a thermos. "You forgot your coffee." He took it and leaned his shoulder against hers. "I've stopped forgetting the important things." They sat there for a while, watching the kids' world expand in bursts of joy and mess and possibility. The rhythm of this life wasn't measured in grand moments, but in small, unremarkable ones. A shared glance, a brushed hand, a bowl of cereal poured without asking. Later that evening, as the house dimmed and dusk crept in, Selena found herself sitting on the edge of the bed, fingers tracing the edge of a weathered photo, one of the few that had followed them from the old house. It was from years ago, when she and Elliot were still barely figuring each other out. The kids were babies. The walls behind them were chipped. Their smiles didn't know what was coming. And yet, looking at it now, it felt like the beginning of something that had taken years to become fully. Elliot walked in quietly, holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea. He handed her one, his hand lingering on hers for a breath longer than necessary. "I've been thinking," he said, settling beside her. She looked over. "That's always dangerous." He laughed. "Not this time." A pause. "I want to marry you again." Selena blinked. "You're already living here, sharing a drawer, planting flowers. What else would change?" He smiled, soft and sure. "Nothing, and everything. I want to stand before you, not the version of us from years ago, but who we are now, and choose you as you are, as we are, not to erase the past, but to bless the future." She didn't answer right away, just looked at him. Looked at him. The man who had once walked away. The man who came back not as a hero, but as a human, flawed, willing, still learning. The man who had built a life with her. One silent cup of tea, one bedtime story, one apology at a time. Her voice was soft when it came. Okay. Yeah. Yes, she whispered, smiling. But only if you let Ava be the ring designer. Oh no, he groaned. She's going to want glitter. Of course she is, Selena said. This is her love story too. They both laughed, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Because not all endings are endings. Some are doorways. And as the days passed, as the flowers grew, as the children learned new words for love, home, and belonging, Selena and Elliot stepped fully into the life they'd almost lost. They didn't pretend the pain had never happened. They refused to let it define the rest of the story. They chose again, and again, and again, until choosing became living, until forgiveness became muscle memory, until love, ordinary, complicated, persistent, became the soil under their feet. And if you've ever stood at the edge of something broken, unsure if it's worth trying again, let this be your sign. Some things are worth returning to. Not to rewind, but to rebuild. From the heart out. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear what part stayed with you. Leave a comment below. Follow for more stories like this, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Because sometimes, love isn't about the first I do. It's about the one you say when no one's watching.